Swarm and very angry anti-immigration activists in California surrounding buses carrying undocumented immigrants heading for processing. This, as the president announces plans to take executive action to deal with what can only be described as a humanitarian crisis along our country's border. Some political pundits and lawmakers say, send them home, no questions asked. Is this what America stands for? And as we ask ourselves that very question, the nation pauses to remember the signing of the Civil Rights Act, which happened 50 years ago to the day. How far have we come as a nation, and would today's Congress pass the same bill if the face of the country looked the same way it did 50 years ago? Plus, a former New York City police officer accused of plotting to kidnap and cannibalize women, he gets off. A judge overturning his case, saying he only fantasized about carrying out such horrific acts. Is what you research or read online grounds for a motive? Our legal team will answer that question and a lot more coming up. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us. And this evening, we head back down to the border, where every day hundreds of Central American children are making that dangerous journey to the United States. Authorities say most of the children set out from their home countries of Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, alone without their parents. If and when they arrive onto American soil after a harrowing journey, Border Patrol agents, they pick them up and they take them to detention centers, usually in Texas or Arizona, where they're fed, clothed, and given medical care until they can be reunited with a family member in the U.S., or they're then handed over to the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, the surge of undocumented children crossing the border has Americans fired up. Take a look at this scene. This is in Murrieta, California, where angry protesters stopped buses carrying nearly 140 undocumented adults and children who are being transported to a Border Patrol processing center from an overcrowded facility in Texas. Again, many of the passengers on board were not only kids, but sick kids at that.
This is a victory for Murrieta, and if they go anywhere else, stop them from coming there too.
They're coming here for free food, free housing.
It's children. Like, it's not their fault. Their parents sent them over here. They're innocent children.
Now, some of the protesters out in California, as well as other parts of the country, aren't alone in voicing that anger. It didn't take long for conservative pundits and even elected lawmakers to sound off about the crisis.
Why not take all of these kids and drop them in all of these wealthy counties in Washington and the suburbs of D.C.? Let's drop them there. Let's have the policymakers actually have to live with the results of their policy.
And then we can have Marco Rubio and Rand Paul going around saying, what are you going to do? Deport them all? Deport them all? Just get them in. And in a matter of years, they'll be voting Democrat and collecting welfare.
I think what you need to do is ask the Guatemalan government where they want these kids dropped off when the buses bring them back down there.
Now, Monday, the president announced plans to use his executive power to make change to the immigration system without the help of Congress. House Speaker John Boehner, he's threatening to sue, you heard me right, sue the president for quote-unquote abusing his power by taking executive actions.
The president continues to ignore laws that he signed into law, violating his oath of office.
Middle-class families can't wait for Republicans in Congress to do stuff. So sue me.
Now, as the tensions over this debate continue to boil, there are a few facts that seem to get lost in the story. Now, as usual, there isn't any great story out there. Lately, it seems that ever contains a certain little thing called truth here. So let me just give you some of the basic math. This doesn't have to be Republican, Democrat. This is just facts. First of all, in 2008, the bill which passed both chambers of the Congress, the House and the Senate, and George W. Bush, remember him, was president? It states exactly how children who cross the border without their parents must be treated. It's what's going on now. It is the policy of the government that happened under the previous president. Secondly, the Obama administration has carried out more deportations. Let me repeat this. More people have been deported under this president, President Obama, than in any other administration in American history. It took the Obama administration just over 5 years to surpass the 2 million deportations that took place under 8 years of Bush's presidency. Okay, I want to bring in the panel on this. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Andrew Whitman, senior political correspondent. And listen, we went around the table last night with some smart people, and everybody was hemming and hawing. Nobody knows what to do about this. I'm not pretending this is easy. You got tens of thousands of kids coming across the border, all told here, and there's not an easy solution to it. But the idea that you got literally sick kids on a bus, and people are taking time, I'm assuming they work, right, to show up and scream at the kids, go home and everything else, when obviously things are bad enough that they're literally going 1,000 miles in the desert, a lot of them, God knows what they're encountering along the way, and their children. And then you got the talking heads saying the stuff that you heard them saying, even some elected officials doing this. I'm not saying open up the borders and let everybody come in that we want to come in, but we are better than that, right?
Well, I was hoping you went to Andrew first.
I can see that. That's why I made your life difficult.
On this one, because I don't think you're going to like what I have to say. We all care about the children. We really do. Well, no, I think I can speak for everyone at this table. I can't speak for those protesters. I mean, if we lived in a community like that, it's limited tax dollars for services, and they feel like they're losing services with this rush of immigration. Richard, but let me just say this. We want to embrace and welcome the children. But if you do that, it's never going to stop.
I get
They're going to keep coming.
I get it. And maybe what we ought to do, the President Andrew says, well, you know, I want $2 billion, Congress, and I want to be able to have more judges, an ability for the court system to fast track and affect the deportations for the process, and we're going to send them all back. Fact of the matter is 4 out of every 5 kids that are across the board, they stay. Whether you like the policy or not, the tone of this is ugly. And that's my problem with it.
Well, there's a lot of problems with it. First of all, I'm not sure if you change the policy, it encourages or discourages these kids from coming to the United States. I don't think there's a lot of research going on in the poorer sections of Guatemala and El Salvador as to what exactly the U.S. Return to home country policy is for undocumented children. You make the change in the law. I don't think it's getting back to them. I think it's just making news in this country. I also think we had the order of this wrong. We had the protesters, and that was pretty despicable stuff that you saw from the protesters. They're not impacting their lives. They're just
yes, they are.
Yes, they are. They're really
yes,
not.
They
they're
are.
Being told,
yes, they
they're being
are.
told that it's impacting their lives
No, they
by
are.
the conservative media, and they're getting all heated up, and they turn up
the conservative
protest.
media, those folks are disgusting. They're just making millions using talking points, but they are impacting their lives, and you know this having worked.
Wait, Dominic.
I'm going to tell you why.
Go ahead. But
okay, I'm going to tell you why, and Andrew knows this better than anyone, having worked in many of those markets. When you have a local hospital, and if the kids in that community are getting those services, the hospital has limited services. And X amount of dollars to treat poor people. And those services are going to go to the children now that would otherwise go to community residents.
It's a fair point, but these kids were on a bus from Texas to California and had just rolled in to a processing station. Why are we protesting these kids who are already in the system and are probably going to wind up going back home? This was all manufactured anger from the conservative right who gets heated up on an issue because it makes the president look bad, or maybe it makes people in their own party look bad, and they think they can score their points and make the next $1 million on it. And people turn out and say horrible
here's
things.
my problem. You got a 10-year-old kid who's sick, okay? We did the numbers. More than 80-some-odd% of the girls that are coming here have been sexually abused before they even get here, okay? And you got some idiot waving the flag, like somehow they came over with the Mayflower, okay? They hit Plymouth Rock here. I can speak for all of us. We weren't on that boat. None of our family members were. I know you weren't, right?
We know.
Okay, so my only point is, it doesn't make you American to go tell some kid, go take a leap here and bleep and bleep. Come on.
But Richard, but where does
first
it
of all,
stop?
the rest of it, when you talk about the social, it's not coming out of any of the local municipality budgets. It's not coming out of the state funding. It's not coming out of any of that. This is a federal program until they can figure out where to go. I'm not saying we got to leave it the way it is. But when I saw the visuals, right, about these people thinking it makes them some tough guy Americans to go tell some 10-year-old, right, that, go to hell and go back to where you came from, I really don't think that's what some of our best who said, give us you're tired, you're hungry.
That
okay?
is not the American way.
They ought to go to the Statue of Liberty and read about it, okay? My kid did a project over there this year, and the amount of folks that were coming over from Europe, by the way, and what they went through. Again, you can't have open borders. I get it. But we can have a debate in this country, and that kind of stuff, and the pandering from the Ann Coulters and the Limbaughs of the world, and some of the elected clowns in Washington.
Who's engaging in this debate, exactly? I mean, the debate for immigration reform, Senate passed a bill a year ago, and the president was hopping mad because nothing's been done in the Senate on it. You get John Boehner, who accuses the president of violating his oath of office by not enforcing that law. What are you talking about? The president's enforced the immigration laws more firmly, as you pointed out, Rich, than George W. Bush did, than any president before him has. He's deported more people than any other president. So is it the politics that John Boehner can't handle, or is it really some horrible maneuver by President Obama? I mean,
and you know what? To his point, so much happens in this country now where facts be damned, and just whichever idiot can get in front of a microphone first in Washington, and then the talking heads on whatever respective side will scream the loudest about it. And again, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
That's true.
If anybody bothered to listen, George W. Bush's immigration policy was more lenient and lax and more welcoming, with shorter windows of time and fewer hurdles for illegal immigrants to become Americans than this president's policy. So somehow Obama here is the great, friend to the immigrants, when the facts of the matter say the last president, the last Republican president we had an easier policy about this than this current president, who's deported more immigrants than any of the previous Republican presidents put together. So for me, so much of this is phoniness. And my only point is the imagery of just kicking the kids here when they're coming to the bus.
Let me ask you a question. I know you got to move on, but let me ask you a question. So we're talking roughly about 60,000 children? How many children?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my question to you is, what happens next week when it's another 60,000? And the week after that, it's 100,000. And those numbers are going to multiply, and those are going to be realistic numbers. The families, let's be honest about this. The families are saying, listen, for you to have a better opportunity, go on your own on this dangerous trip and go to America.
We need to have a better policy, but I guarantee you if I went to that same community in the farming communities of Marietta, and I wanted to see who was picking the fruit and the nuts and everything else in the farms, I'm not finding too many guys that look like you, me, or Andrew out there. They're using illegal labor. They're happily doing it, right? And now all of a sudden they're flipping out because the kids are coming over because Rush Limbaugh told them that this is the end of America. That's where I've got the problem with all the hypocrisy going on this conversation. You're right. It can't be the way it is. I still haven't heard one person, yours included, that has got a coherent answer to this system or this problem. But nothing got accomplished when people start screaming at little kids coming into buses, waving the American flag like that's what we stand for. All right, now the debate over the border crisis has certainly heated up our Facebook page as well. Now, on Tuesday, we asked you, what do you think the U.S. ought to do with the border kids? And we gave you a couple options: provide temporary housing until the children are reunited with a family, or B, bus them right back home. And these are some of the comments that we got. Danny says, how many American kids are in the adoption system already? Next comment says, bus them back home, can't even house our own people. Chuck says, temporary housing up to 90 days and then bus them home if they haven't been reunited within that 3-month period. Either way, it's going to be another expense for taxpayers. And Diane says, bus them back. We have so many American homeless kids here in our own country. Let's take care of them first. That's just a sample of some of the comments on this subject. All right, coming up next, we mentioned off the top, today an important day in American history. It's the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act, that landmark legislation that many people point to as long overdue, at least in the beginning, to some form of racial equity in this country. Earlier this year, Andrew went to Austin, Texas for the Civil Rights Summit, honoring the very legislation we'll talk about. After the break, we're going to hear his interview with, among others, Julian Bond, who spoke to RFL about the state of civil rights in this country and how far we've come.